The wind does not just blow. When you are 500 feet in the air, it howls. It tears at your clothes and screams in your ears like a living thing, trying to pull you right off the glass. Arthur clung to the side of the towering Genesis corporate building, his knuckles white inside his worn work gloves. He was suspended outside the 50th floor, entirely at the mercy of a sudden autumn gale. But the wind was not the thing making his heart hammer against his ribs. It was the sound coming from his waist. A sharp, synthetic tearing noise. Snap. Another thread of his safety harness gave way, under the strain of a heavy gust. He looked down, past his scuffed boots, at the dizzying drop to the concrete sidewalks below, where cars looked like slow-moving ants. His harness was old, frayed, and strictly against safety regulations. But Arthur did not have the luxury of complaining. If that nylon strap snapped completely, he would lose everything. Not just his life, but his reason for living. When facing injustice and danger just to make a living and raise a family, what motivates you to keep steering the ship, without giving up? Share your own story of resilience in the comments below, so we can understand. I declare to my own soul, even if I have to hang suspended amidst a storm thousands of feet in the air, my integrity and my love for my child will be the strongest safety harness keeping me upright. If you believe in the bravery of a courageous father, hit that subscribe button to join my daughter and me on our journey. Just 3 hours earlier, Arthur had been standing in the cold, damp basement of the building, arguing with his supervisor. Marcus was a contractor who cared about exactly one thing in this world, and that was his profit margin. He had tossed the faded, thinning harness at Arthur, with a dismissive sneer. Arthur had pointed out the heavy fraying near the main carabiner loop. He told Marcus it was a death trap. Marcus just laughed, adjusting his expensive tie, and told Arthur that safety gear costs money. He said if Arthur didn't want to wear it, there were 10 other desperate guys waiting in line for his job. He also casually mentioned that if Arthur walked out now, his paycheck for the last 3 weeks would be permanently delayed. Arthur thought about the stack of past due bills sitting on his kitchen counter. He thought about the cough his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had been fighting for a month, and the cost of the medicine she needed. Most importantly, he thought about the promise he made to always provide for her, after her mother passed away. So, Arthur had swallowed his pride, strapped on the compromised gear, and stepped onto the suspended platform. Now, hanging outside the 50th floor, a sudden downdraft slammed into the scaffolding. The platform lurched violently. Arthur's stomach dropped as he slipped, his weight suddenly hanging heavily against the frayed harness. Creak. He squeezed his eyes shut, expecting the final snap, expecting the freefall. But the strap held. Barely. Breathing heavily, his forehead pressed against the freezing glass. Arthur desperately needed a reason not to panic. His trembling hand reached for the clipboard attached to his bucket. Clipped right next to his work order was a piece of cheap construction paper. It was a drawing done in bright, messy crayons. It showed a tall stick figure holding hands with a small stick figure, standing under a bright yellow sun. In clumsy, uneven letters, it read, "My daddy is the bravest." Lily had given it to him that morning, telling him it was a magic shield to keep the wind away. Looking at those crooked wax lines, the tension in Arthur's jaw began to soften. A genuine, gentle smile broke through the fear on his weathered face. He took a deep breath, steadied his footing on the swaying metal grate, and picked up his squeegee. He had a job to do, and he was going to do it perfectly, no matter how bad the conditions were. He began to carefully wipe away the grime on the thick pane of glass, his movements precise and deliberate. On the other side of that exact pane of glass, it was a completely different universe. Inside the 50th floor boardroom, the air was warm, climate-controlled, and smelled of expensive coffee and leather. There was no wind in here. There was no danger. Sitting at the head of a massive mahogany table was Eleanor Vance, the CEO and majority owner of the Genesis Corporation. She was a woman who had built an empire by being notoriously sharp, demanding, and uncompromising. Right now, she was rubbing her temples, trying to fend off a headache. Standing at the front of the room, presenting a budget report to the board of directors, was none other than Marcus. Marcus was currently pitching for a massive contract renewal for his maintenance company. He was speaking loudly, using grand hand gestures, and boasting about his unparalleled commitment to worker safety. He pointed to a slide on the projector showing inflated numbers for equipment upgrades. He proudly proclaimed that every single worker under his employment was equipped with top-tier European standard safety gear. He told the board that he treated his men like family, never cutting corners when lives were on the line. Eleanor listened to the smooth, rehearsed lies, her eyes drifting away from the glowing projector screen. She was bored, and something about Marcus's overly polished pitch felt deeply hollow to her. She turned her gaze toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, seeking a moment of distraction. That was when she saw him, just inches away, separated only by a sheet of reinforced glass. Was a man fighting a silent battle against the sky. Eleanor watched as a fierce gust of wind battered the worker outside. She saw the way his makeshift platform swung dangerously. But more importantly, her sharp eyes caught the details that Marcus was currently lying about. She saw the rusted carabiner. She saw the terrifyingly frayed edges of the nylon strap, supporting the man's entire body weight. It was practically hanging by a thread. Her brow furrowed in immediate concern and anger. But then, she saw something else that made her breath catch in her throat. Taped securely to the man's clipboard was a child's drawing. It was a simple, colorful sketch of a father and daughter holding hands under a bright sun, even through the thick, soundproof glass. Eleanor could see the way the man looked at that piece of paper. His eyes, which moments ago were wide with absolute terror, had softened into something incredibly tender. He was finding his courage not in a paycheck, but in the pure love for his child. The stark contrast hit Eleanor like a physical blow to the chest. Inside this warm, luxurious room, a man in a $3,000 suit was lying through his teeth to secure a multi-million-dollar contract. Outside in the freezing wind, a father was risking his life on a frayed nylon thread just to put food on the table, finding his strength in a crayon drawing. Marcus was still talking, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. He was just wrapping up his speech about his unwavering dedication to his employees' well-being. Eleanor stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the polished hardwood floor. The entire room fell dead silent. Marcus stopped mid-sentence, a confident smile freezing awkwardly on his face. Eleanor did not look at the board members. She kept her eyes fixed on the window. She pointed a single, manicured finger toward the glass. "Come here, Marcus," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Marcus blinked, confused. But he quickly walked over to where the CEO was standing. He looked out the window, expecting to see some structural issue she wanted to point out. Instead, he saw Arthur, desperately trying to steady himself against a massive gust of wind. "Look at his waist," Eleanor instructed, her tone like ice. Marcus's face instantly lost all its color. He saw the frayed, compromised safety harness that he had personally handed to Arthur that very morning. "Is that your idea of a European standard safety protocol?" Eleanor asked, turning to face him. Marcus opened his mouth, stammering, desperately trying to formulate a lie. He tried to say that it must be an isolated incident, a rogue employee who forgot to check out the new gear. Eleanor did not let him finish. She had spent 20 years reading people in boardrooms, and she knew a greedy, corner-cutting liar when she saw one. "You stand in my boardroom and preach about valuing human life, while you force a father to hang by a thread in a gale, just to pad your margins," she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. "In your opinion, how can a leader with a compassionate heart and empathetic vision for vulnerable workers bring about life-changing values?" Please leave your thoughtful and civilized comments below. Lord, we pray that you protect the hardworking people who have to gamble their lives just to survive, and bless them with kind companions to lift them up. Please click subscribe to help us spread this love and stand up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Eleanor turned to her executive assistant, who was already frantically taking notes. "Call building security and have Marcus escorted off the premises immediately," she ordered. Then, she looked back at Marcus, who was now sweating profusely despite the climate control. "Your contract with Genesis Corporation is terminated. Effective this exact second. Expect a full legal audit of your company's safety records by tomorrow morning. If I find out anyone else was put in danger because of your greed, I will personally see to it that you never work in this city again." Security guards quickly entered the room, grabbing Marcus by the arms and dragging him toward the elevators. He was shouting apologies, begging for a second chance. But Eleanor had already turned her back on him. Her immediate priority was the man outside the window. "Get the emergency maintenance crew up to the roof right now," she yelled to her team. "Pull him up safely. And do not take any chances." For the next 15 minutes, Eleanor stood by the glass, her heart pounding, watching as the rescue team lowered a secondary, heavy-duty line to Arthur. She watched him secure the new carabiner, with trembling hands. When they finally hoisted him over the roof parapet, a collective sigh of relief washed over the boardroom. 10 minutes later, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom opened. Arthur stood there, accompanied by the building manager. He was shivering, his face pale, and he looked incredibly out of place in his dirty work clothes, standing on the plush carpet. He clutched his clipboard tightly to his chest, the child's drawing facing outward. He expected to be yelled at, to be fired for causing a scene and disrupting a high-level meeting. Instead, Eleanor Vance, the billionaire CEO, walked across the room and stood in front of him. She looked at the fraying, pathetic excuse for a safety harness he was still holding. Then, she looked down at the drawing of the father and daughter. "What is her name?" Eleanor asked softly. Arthur blinked, completely taken aback by the question. "Lily, ma'am," he replied, his voice hoarse from the cold wind. "She is 7. Eleanor smiled. A genuine, warm expression that her board members rarely got to see. "Well, Arthur, Lily is incredibly lucky to have a father as brave as you," she said. She gestured for her assistant to bring over a freshly printed document. "We just fired our exterior maintenance contractor," Eleanor explained, handing the paper to Arthur. "Genesis Corporation is going to hire an in-house maintenance team starting today. You will have full benefits, health insurance for you and Lily. And you will personally oversee the purchase of every single piece of safety equipment." Arthur stared at the contract, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold the paper. Tears welled up in his tired eyes, blurring the ink on the page. He had walked into this building expecting to lose his life, or his livelihood. He was walking out with a future. "Thank you," he whispered, the weight of 1,000 stressful nights finally lifting off his shoulders. Hours later, the sun had set, and the city was illuminated by millions of glowing lights. Arthur walked down the busy sidewalk, holding Lily's small, warm hand in his. They stopped at a street vendor to buy a hot pretzel, laughing together, completely lost in their own little world. High above them, on the 50th floor, Eleanor stood by the pristine, spotless window. She looked down at the street, easily spotting the father and daughter walking away. She placed her hand against the cold glass, feeling a profound sense of peace. She had saved a life today, but more importantly, that humble window washer had saved her from losing her humanity in the relentless pursuit of profit. The dust on the glass can be wiped clean, but the mark of a father's deep love and honor will always shine brilliantly. Please write a heartwarming comment to send positive energy to the wind-defying journey of our father and daughter.